Right now on Upfront.
Breaking his silence.
Don't tell the media, don't alert the media, make it secret.
The 2020 fake electors scheme capturing national headlines again. Wasn't that a red flag, though? New potential investigations, criminal charges, and now Andrew Hitt is here. Would you do it again?
It's such a hard question to answer.
The former chair of the Republican Party of Wisconsin, a Trump elector now cooperating with federal investigators, speaking out in his first television interview just moments away. Then, more fallout.
This is the fake document.
Democrats demanding another Republican elector be removed from the Wisconsin Elections Commission. Democratic Secretary of State Sarah Godlewski is here. Her demands and what she thinks of the proposed legislation that will give her power over the state's elections.
This is Upfront with Jaron Jordan and political director Matt Smith.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. A ton of new attention this week on Wisconsin's 2020 false Republican electors, and now whether new state investigations or charges are possible. 10 Republicans met privately in the Capitol in December 2020 and filed paperwork falsely claiming former President Trump won the state when he didn't. The group just settled a civil lawsuit accusing them of a conspiracy to defraud voters. As part of the settlement, the Republican electors acknowledged the paperwork was used as part of a larger plot by the Trump campaign to overturn the results of the 2020 election and have agreed to not serve as electors in 2024 or anytime Trump is on the ballot. The electors have largely remained silent until now. Andrew Hitt was one of the Republican electors and former chair of the Republican Party of Wisconsin. He was subpoenaed and testified before the January 6th committee and has been cooperating with federal investigators for several months. He joins us now in his first television interview. Andrew, welcome back to Upfront. Good to see you.
Good to be here, Matt.
There's a lot that we're going to get to and a lot to walk through. I first want to start with the latest, newest reporting. Several outlets have indicated that the Wisconsin Department of Justice has launched its own investigation here in Wisconsin. I want to listen to what the Attorney General told me this past week. Can you confirm that?
So first, I think that anybody who committed a crime to try to overturn the results of the election should be held accountable. Now, at the Department of Justice, we don't generally confirm or deny the existence of ongoing investigations, and we're following that approach here as well.
From your perspective, are you under investigation by the state?
No, I don't believe I am. And, really, we've seen time and time again with this, when we have an opportunity to talk to people and tell them what we knew, what we, more importantly, didn't know, show them our text messages, our emails, it becomes very clear. We were tricked. We weren't made aware of any ulterior motive or scheme, and we wouldn't have gone along with it had we been told about it.
In the past, have you talked with any state Department of Justice investigators?
I have not talked to the state, no.
So you don't believe you're under investigation by Attorney General Call at this moment?
No, I do not.
Let's talk about the settlement that you just reached. We walked through some of the details of that. You've also agreed to fully cooperate with any federal DOJ investigations. I'm curious from your perspective, what did you admit in this settlement?
Settlement negotiations went very well. The things we agreed to, we just viewed as true. Joe Biden won this election. It's pretty clear now that we didn't know that there was this ulterior motive, this different plan. And it's clear now, too, that, those documents were used on January 6th to at the very least, help create the chaos of that day.
Let's talk about the day itself. December 14th, it's going to be 3 years ago this past week. In that moment, when you walked into that room, what did you and the other electors think you were doing?
Well, we had been very careful to talk to our lawyers here in Wisconsin. Longtime Republican Party of Wisconsin lawyers. We didn't talk to the Trump campaign lawyers. We didn't talk to Rudy Giuliani. We didn't talk to lawyers who we didn't know or didn't trust. We talked to our RPW longtime outside counsel. He independently looked at this issue and said, you guys have to meet. If the Trump campaign wins a lawsuit in Wisconsin and you don't meet, we will have completely forfeited the president winning Wisconsin. So we viewed what we were doing as simply a contingency plan. The documents we signed would have no meaning unless a court gave them meaning.
Looking back at it now, what do you believe you were walking in that room to do that day?
I think what we believe and what we thought we were doing was clearly just to be a contingency plan. Now we know that other people had other ideas of what they were going to do with our documents. And that's clear from the January 6th investigation. It's clear from the indictment.
There's critics of yours who want you in jail.
Absolutely. And, you know, that's never, you know, something you want to hear as a person, right? But if you look at, you know, what our text messages say, what our emails say, what conversations we were having that we never thought would see the light of day, it becomes very clear. And everybody who's looked at it has come to the same conclusion, whether it's the January 6th committee, the special counsel's office, or I would argue even Law Forward. They certainly wouldn't have settled with us if they thought there was that we were part of some vast conspiracy.
Bill Feehan was one of the Republican electors as well in that room. Shortly after that day on his podcast, he kind of walked through from his perspective what happened. Take a listen to a little part of that.
Drove to a secret meeting place in Madison and met all the other electors there. There was security, armed security to protect us, and other officials from the Republican Party of Wisconsin were there.
Why was that needed, a secret meeting place and armed security?
So the secret meeting place was the Republican Party of Wisconsin, so not so secret. So, you know, I'm sure that got some interest on a podcast, but it doesn't really match the reality. We had asked everybody to come to the Republican Party of Wisconsin. We'd meet there, and then during the winter, uphill with snow on the ground, we took a number of different vehicles to get us up there, walked in, signed our documents and walked out. We were very concerned about security. At that time, I was getting phone calls, emails, messages. At that time, I was getting a phone call to my office every day demanding to know where my location was. It did not feel like a safe time. We didn't want to disturb anything. We didn't want to disturb the Democrat electors. We just wanted to go in and do our contingency plan, and that's it. So absolutely, there's a lot of pressure. There was a lot of fear. And remember, our lawyer is saying, if we don't do this, Andrew, if you don't have the electors meet and Trump wins, it will be you who caused him to lose Wisconsin completely. You will be responsible for him forfeiting Wisconsin. Think about the pressure and the amount of repercussions that would have arose had we done that.
Was that attorney talking with RNC officials or Trump campaign officials in giving you that advice?
He talked to both RNC and Trump campaign officials.
Joe Olson we're talking about?
As a good lawyer would, right? He was the one who would communicate with them.
Do you think he was aware of the larger planning?
He absolutely would not. Was not aware. I've known him for a long time. We've worked together for a long time. He's been RPW counsel for a long time. Had he known this, we would have never met.
You said a lot has been unveiled, including your text messages in both the settlement that was reached, your testimony before the January 6th committee. Some of it showed discussions that day on how you were going to get into the Capitol, as you referenced, who should go in and when they should go in, how not to draw attention to yourself. Rudy Giuliani told some Wisconsin folks at one point, no press, no heads up. Was all of this planning attempt to make this secret?
Well, it certainly seemed like it. In the days that led up to it, it certainly seemed like it. We were moving along with this lawsuit, and we had been told by our lawyers a couple weeks ahead of time that we were going to have to meet. But then as we got closer, it seemed as though there were things going on in other states that we didn't know about. And then we get to that weekend before, and there's this directive that from Rudy Giuliani that to keep this quiet. Don't tell the media, don't alert the media, make it secret. We weren't going to follow that. We didn't follow that. As soon as we got done, we did a press release explaining exactly what we did and why we did it.
Wasn't that a red flag, though?
You know, in hindsight, sure, it feels like a red flag now. At the time, it just felt more of what they were up to, more of kind of the ridiculousness that was going on, where they would go on TV and make these allegations that clearly weren't true.
In response to the Rudy Giuliani comment, you texted Mark Jefferson, executive director of the state party. These guys are up to no good, and it's going to fail miserably. What do you mean by that?
So I was talking specifically there about just this idea that we should keep this secret, this idea that not to tell anybody. I thought that was ludicrous. I wasn't going to keep it secret. I wanted to make sure everybody knew what we did and why we did it.
What were you thinking as you walked into the Capitol that day?
I'd like to get in, get this done, and get out as soon as we possibly can.
No red flags.
No, I mean,
At the moment.
you know, if we had told the in the Supreme Court brief, the Trump campaign said the Wisconsin electors, we've asked the Wisconsin electors to meet and to send their paperwork to Washington. That went to the Wisconsin Elections Commission. Obviously, the Department of Justice saw it. It's important to know nobody raised a red flag. Our lawyers didn't. WEC knew we were going to meet. The Department of Justice knew we were going to meet. Presumably, the governor knew we were going to meet. Nobody reached out and said, I don't think you should do this. Nobody was waiting for us at the Capitol saying, no, you're not allowed to come in and do this. Nothing. We had no red flags that what we were about to do, that anybody would think it was improper.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, more of our conversation, including Kenneth Chesbro, his role in this, the federal investigation, and what's next ahead of 2024.